I'll get straight to the point. I want a nice customised steering wheel to replace the bog standard wheel on my Cupra R. But to be honest, I couldn't afford the luxury ones you get online that are about £600 or more. So being a keen DIYer probably like yourself, what I did was bought a second-hand wheel off eBay. I sent some of the bits of it off to get hydro dipped. I also bought a wheel cover from Finesse, and then I made this. So here's the full process if you want to give it a go yourself. Now my second-hand steering wheel from eBay cost 50 quid at the time. It was a little bit scuffed up but nothing too severe. I am going to incorporate it just now at the start of the budget for making this steering wheel, but at the end you'll find out why you can take it back off again. So I started taking the plastic trim off the steering wheel to get sent off to get hydro dipped, and as always this bottom trim was damaged. It just happens when the bolts at the back get over tightened and they snap off the pieces inside the steering wheel. Nothing can be done to help this, so I just had to make do with what I had. Then just simply take out the 4 wee screws on each of the sides for the multifunction steering wheel controls, and then pop the front cover off, keeping the rest all nice and tidy in a wee box. And like I said, these bits will be getting sent off to Josh now to get hydro dipped. Now I had tried a couple of years ago to try and customise the bottom trim on my old steering wheel that's still in the car. Gloss black, which turned out horribly as you can see by the pictures, but I did need the black insert from this trim with the Cupra logo on it. I removed the R sticker as well. Then 2 weeks later I got the hydro dipped parts back from Josh, and you can see massive difference in how good they look. And I cleaned up the Cupra bit because it was a bit scuffed up, so I cleaned that with some polish. A quick clean of the multifunction controls with some earbud things, I can't remember what they're called, and also some rubbing alcohol. Then just to reattach the new hydro dip pieces back on top and put the screws back in. And if you're wondering, these hydro dip pieces, all 3 of them, so the 2 side pieces and the bottom trim, cost £60 from Josh. Then again, using some rubbing alcohol, I cleaned up the surface of the second-hand steering wheel, just made sure it was nice and clean. As you can see, it wasn't at the time, so a lot of dirt did come off, and this just makes sure that everything sticks to the new wheel properly. Oh, and just before we unbox the Finesse cover to put on this wheel, I've got a discount code coming up later on in the video, so stick around for that. So quick unboxing of the wheel cover itself, so you'll get a wee 15% off voucher for your next order, air freshener, some instructions, which you should really look at properly, some trim pieces to put the cover under your existing trim along with the stitching, and also the cover itself. And you can see the stickers inside, they're just indicating the front and the back of the wheel cover so you know which way around to have it. So I'll quickly go through my first attempt at this, which was a failed attempt, so I won't cover it in too much detail. Basically, most steering wheel covers will come as one complete piece, one circle basically, so you basically stretch it around the whole wheel, top to bottom and the sides. Now because of the Mark II Leon design on some steering wheels, there's no part on the steering wheel across the bottom because the trim is usually there instead. So what I thought I could do is just basically add loads of double-sided tape and stick it to the top and then try and stretch it and stick it down on the sides. There was far too much tension in the wheel to keep it in place during this point, so this was basically no use at all. My second attempt off camera, what I did was I stitched one side, as you can see here. Now this was basically without the top of the steering wheel cover in place, it's at across the back of the steering wheel instead. There's no tension on it at all, it's just lying there loose. And then the other side of the steering wheel cover is held in place with double-sided tape. I'm just making sure that the white stitching on the cover is lining up roughly with where the red stitching on the existing wheel was. So pop a couple of knots in the end of your thread, and then basically you're just pushing it through the back of the cover from one side and out through beside the white thread that's already on this wheel cover itself. Now I'm not going to say the way I'm doing it just now is the correct method, but it seemed to work out okay for me in the end, as you'll see later on in the finished result. I just went back and forth at the start of the wheel cover to try and get it secure in place, and then I started going up the way by missing every second stitch. Just going up the whole way, and then I would do a few crosses at the other end back and forth to hold it in place, and then go back down the way missing every second stitch, and this would give this crisscross effect, which seemed to be secure and also looked decent as well. And surprise, surprise, whenever you film stuff for YouTube, it never goes straight forward. I ended up seeing that I'd missed a stitch on the first pass on the way up. I was going back the way on the second pass, and I couldn't do it properly because this stitch we missed. So I had to actually unpick all the white thread, pretty much back to the start, and then start again, which cost me about 10 or 15 minutes or so. But once both sides were finished and in place and the thread was trimmed, it was now time to get this top of the steering wheel cover up and over in place. So it was quite tricky, it was very tight to get in place. I think that's because I stitched the sides quite far down. Maybe I should have left a bit more slack on the back of the wheel cover, on the back of the steering wheel, but that's just hindsight now. I did manage to get it in place off camera because I had to get some leverage over it and stick it on the floor in front of me. Now before I start stitching the top of the wheel, I just want to make sure that the white thread on the new cover was in line with the red thread of the old steering wheel itself. Whatever colour you've got for your stitching, just make sure it lines up roughly across the whole of the top of the steering wheel. Remember, there's always double-sided tape to help you secure the cover to hold it in place if it's moving around too much. I used some at the sides of the cover just to make sure that it stayed nice and flat and there wasn't any crinkles or sticking up bits. These excess kind of flappy bits here, I think they're trying to hide the old stitching on the old wheel, so I kind of left them loose just now and I'll sort them later on in the video. So I'll start now stitching the top of the steering wheel from one side to the other, and mistake number 2 made here. So basically I just started stitching the white stitching side by side from one side of the steering wheel and just kept on going up the way, and as I reached the join of the perforated leather to the normal leather, I could find that the join wasn't going to line up either side. It was off by about 2 or 3 stitches. So I counted the stitches back the way and it turned out I had to leave 3 stitches spare on one side, and then on the first stitch on one side to the 4th stitch on the other side would have to be lined up to make sure that the join of the leather later on met in the same place on one side and actually would then meet in the same place on the other side as well. So currently on the first pass just now, so from one side to the other doing one set of stitches, just to make sure you're holding the wheel in place or twisting it back into place if its stitch is starting to go out of line, and then also just making sure that it's sticking down properly and the edges are meeting together quite nicely as well. But don't forget on the second pass, as you go back the way, it'll start pulling it all in together and make it nice and tidy. And then finally onto these flappy bits that are left over, so I just put double-sided tape across the whole of them and then stuck them down securely over the old red stitching to make sure it wasn't on show. And I just trimmed out a bit of excess leather here on the insides to make sure the controls could go back into place. Then onto the bit of trim at the bottom of the wheel. Now this was a wee bit hard because I'd left so much excess material here at the bottom of the cover under the trim. If I did it again, I wouldn't have this so far down and have a little bit of material but not as much as this. You can just see it's quite hard to be tucking all this material under the trim and still trying to get the trim close together. I popped the 4 screws in the back then, just tightening them ever so gently, making sure they weren't over tightened because that would just cause more damage to the trim. And that was the wheel then finished. It's pretty straightforward to change a wheel on this car. You just basically have the wheel turn one way first and you release the wee clip on the back of the airbag, and then you turn it 180 degrees the other way and release the other clip and the airbag just comes out. You can remove the airbag fuse for safety. Take off the 2 connectors that are shown here. Then remove the airbag to one side. Get one of these multi-spline bits and just undo the nut in the centre of the steering wheel. Take a note of the wee mark to make sure that you have your wheel lined up when it goes back on. Then fit your new wheel. Now you can add some thread lock to the bolt before you put it back into the centre of the steering wheel as you tighten it up. Just make sure you fit the 2 connectors back from the airbag. And then finally just make sure that the wires run through this wee channel here to keep the wires away from the clips on the back of the airbag. Then push your airbag back into place, make sure you get 2 clicks from either side, and then refit the fuse for the airbag. Now the wheel finesse cover after discount was £85, meaning my total spend for this wheel was £195, but if I sell my old steering wheel for roughly about £75, what they're going for now on eBay, I could do this whole build on this brand new custom steering wheel for just £120. And if you want to get a wheel finesse cover for yourself, I've got a discount code just for my viewers. It's NCW, so put NCW in the discount code box and you'll get money off your order. So this is going to sound strange, but girth and leather. I have taken the car for a quick test drive and what a difference it makes having this on the wheel. Having it as a thicker steering wheel and the new leather just makes it 10 times better than the previous steering wheel. And remember as well, this is about quarter the price on those fancy ones online. And on the theme of saving money, if you want to see a video where I saved 500 quid not having to buy a second-hand gearbox for this car, then check out over here. As always, thanks for watching. Hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed the video, hit subscribe to catch more videos from the channel in future, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.